join us as well. So we haven't in the past actually had a senator here. So I think that'll make an interesting addition to our panel. So do you guys have opening remarks you want to make, or do you want to go straight to questions? Yeah, what?
The microphone. Good evening. Y'all called Glenn Whitley, by the way. I wrote him a letter today. He needs to hear from us. This session was, for me, the most frustrating session. I'm sure we're going to get into that. But I want to say before we get started that there's a disagreement in the conservative movement on a number of things, and that doesn't mean that there's not personal respect for other individuals or that I'm trying to attack them personally. So if you hear disagreement tonight, I want to be very clear. That doesn't mean that I don't have love for the two folks that are up here. So I just wanted to lay that out. I feel like it's my job to tell you the truth as I see it. Sometimes perspective matters, and I will tell you that there are many times this session that folks from Tarrant County had a different perspective, so it's going to be up for y'all to make the decision on which way you see it. And it might be a mismatch, it might do everything else, but I just want to say that just because I see something completely different than, say, Representative Krause here, who's my good friend, does not mean that I don't respect this man or that it's a personal attack. So I just wanted to start the conversation with that. I also want to thank you guys. Had so much encouragement, had some rough days, some bad votes, a lot of different things. And knowing that you are back at home makes all of that so much easier and keeps things in perspective. So from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of my family, thank you for your love, support, and prayers, because we felt them.
And I echo Jonathan's comments. I think there's going to be some disagreement, and that's okay. It's how you voice that and how you go about voicing those disagreements that I think that helps. I always say that I love Fran Rhodes because we disagreed a couple of times this session on different things, and she calls me to task and she keeps me accountable, but always in a way that I think actually promotes communication and dialogue with us and helps me know, okay, this is where I'm maybe straying here, this is where I'm doing okay here, and so that's very valuable. So I just want to, I think we did some really good things this session, some really good things. I think there were also some big missed opportunities this session that we need to focus on for next session. So I'm excited to answer your questions. I did want to say I have my beautiful wife Jenny here tonight. She doesn't always get to come to these things, and we had a busted pipe in our house a couple of hours ago, so I didn't know she's going to be here tonight. But in-laws are awesome, and so they were able to be there. So for Jenny and the kids, for what they did for the last 5 or 6 months, if you'd give her a round of applause.
All right, you guys ready? Okay. If Texas is so pro-life and Republicans have the majority, including the House and Senate, Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor, why are pro-life bills left to die in committees, and why did the Speaker appoint Rep. Thompson as Chair of Public Health?
Well, that last question is a question the Speaker would have to answer. I don't think any of us know why, can go into his thought process. In terms of pro-life legislation, I was telling Luke Macias earlier today, I was talking with him, and I said anytime you see the Democrat governor of Louisiana signing a heartbeat bill, it does make you feel like, man, we missed an opportunity there. I will say that, you know, sometimes it's a matter of numbers too. Representative Matt Schaefer out of Tyler has done an incredible job the last couple of sessions on the House floor prior to this one, trying to get a fetal abnormality amendment added to our pro-life bills, and it hasn't happened every time. And it wasn't because of Democrats, because we always had numbers, because of Republicans. And so I think there was a bit to some of the pro-life bills didn't make it onto the floor because they weren't sure that there were enough Republican votes there to actually pass them. So again, where I said we did some really good things, one of the really good things I think we did this session was on budget days. Representative Stickland and I and some others worked together on funding alternatives to abortion. Last session we got, on budget day, we added $20 million to that program, which took us from $18 million to $38 million. This time we took it from 38 million to 90 million. And what these alternative to abortion programs do is allow, it's exactly what it says. It's for adoption agencies, it's for health care for mothers, it's for prenatal care, it's for postnatal care. It's all these things that help cultivate a culture of life here in Texas and provide for the sanctity of life. And so when we're funding that almost 300% more than we have in the past, what we did in the House wasn't matched in the Senate, so they actually kind of met in the middle there, was a little less. But so I think there were some good things we did on the pro-life front, but obviously we missed some opportunities as well. So I know that's one area that Representative Stickland's passionate about. It's one area I'm very passionate about as well. And so I look forward to hopefully getting back down there next session and improving on that. Did we miss a window? We're seeing a lot of other states move more aggressively on pro-life legislation. Yeah, we probably did. Was some of that a political reality of what you could get out of the House? Probably some of it was, but we learned those lessons and we move forward next time.
So this is probably going to be a familiar theme to answering a lot of these questions, assuming they're along the same lines. And here's what it comes down to for me. In the last election, Democrats made huge gains, okay? And there's two different ways to respond to that from the Republican side. Number one, you can do what we did, which is run to the left and try and not be noticed. Or you can view it as this may be our last chance to get anything significant in case Texas does turn blue. I have a feeling and a theory that if conservatives would be who we are, that it draws a contrast to our opposition. The folks who I've talked to coming home are very upset. Their property taxes situation was not addressed properly. A lot of different missed opportunities. I don't know anyone who's excited about going and block walking on a Saturday in the next election. And I don't know a lot of donors who are ready to pull out their pocketbook and give money to a legislator. And we had a decision to make. I think the leadership in Texas made that decision loud and clear. They decided that we were going to try and do the least amount possible and not give the Democrats any ammunition, so they said. I think it was a poor decision, and the life issue is one of those that suffered because we did not move the ball in any substantial way. We had a couple of small wins, but when we're talking about life, I don't know what there is to compromise. You either think that abortion is murder or you don't. And if you think it's murder, then you should be pushing to do something about it. And I think it is best for
Yeah, I want to welcome Kelly Hancock. Okay, so this question kind of goes along with what Jonathan was just talking about. Do you get the feeling that the three top Texas leaders, so that would be Abbott and Dan Patrick and Bonin, have a plan to keep Texas red because it doesn't seem like it to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do. I think the last thing you would want if you're one of those big three leaders is for Texas to turn blue on your watch. And so I think that's actually very important to them. I've talked with the speaker multiple times on this very issue. I know that he's got a plan and an idea of how he wants to make sure, because I mean, honestly, too, if we don't keep Texas red, he's not Speaker Bonin anymore. So he's invested in it as well. Governor Abbott's very invested in it because the policies and ideals that he champions will not make any headway if we don't have a Republican House and a Republican Senate. And the last thing Lieutenant Governor Patrick wants is to have somebody, he had a hard enough time last couple of sessions with Speaker Strauss, who was a Republican, working with somebody who wasn't ideologically aligned. It'd be so much worse if it was a Democrat. So I don't know why there would be anybody's invested or have any incentive not to do all they can to keep Texas red. As Representative Stickland said, he might disagree with the strategy or the tactics they're taking, but to doubt that they want to make sure Texas stays red in the deepest shade of red possible, I think we can all, hopefully we can all agree on that.
Well, the reality is we came within 8 seats of losing the House, and the 8 seats we had 8 members who won by single digits, and so the margin of victory was very, very limited. I can tell you Lieutenant Governor Patrick's whole intention was to make sure that next session, which is when we have your redistricting, and the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker all understand there's nothing more valuable than making sure that we keep a Republican speaker. during the redistricting time, because on the redistricting board is made up of the Speaker of the House. And so all those realignments of seats and how districts are going to be drawn in this next legislative session all depends on making sure that we keep the House, and recognizing that that frankly there were enough members that won within, what, a 5-point swing, right?
Yep.
A 5-point swing of voters that we could have easily lost the House this time. You know, Jonathan, I think below 50%, right? Probably went to bed not thinking you were going back to Austin, and woke up the next morning thinking, I'm
That's
going
the best
back.
night's sleep he had in years.
Well, it made all of us nervous. I mean, you know, we went to dinner thinking we were going to Connie Burton's victory party, and that didn't happen. We had a change of plans, like I'm sure many of you had. It was an unexpected night, and so the very focus on everything was making sure that we addressed the number one and number two issues across the state without a court mandate, which was the first time it's been done in 38 years. Nothing pulled higher than property tax reform. How many of you saw your property taxes go up the last several years, Julie? 6%, 7%? Once again, right?
Still is.
How many of y'all would like to see that cut in half? All right, well, that's what we did. How many of you would like to see it cut in a third? Well,
You
that's-
mean the increase is cut in half, not my taxes?
Yeah, the amount of increase that you see from time to time, from year after year, which get compounded, was going up 6% a year. And for the first time in 38 years, that number got lowered, 3.5% for cities and counties, 2.5% for school districts, plus, which cost, so there's roughly $6 billion in spending that it gets charged against us when we buy down property taxes. So, I mean, that 6% to 7% year after year after year would have continued to happen along that way if it wasn't for the 86th legislative session taking on an issue that for the first time in 38 years we took on without a court order or a court mandate. And so, pretty significant. And it is the most popular issue across the state. I can tell you, I don't know of any mayor that's sending me Christmas cards because of my position on property tax reform, or county commissioners, and I can assure you my county judge is not sending, I'm not on the top of his Christmas card list because we limited the rate of growth for the first time in 38 years, and it's never been done without a court mandate. And so those are significant, and we recognize those were the number one and number two issues across the board for both Republicans, Democrats, and those independents, which is a growing segment of our voter base in the state of Texas, and we made sure that we addressed that. But from the Senate standpoint, our focus was, and the Lieutenant Governor's focus, making sure that when redistricting comes and we have to redraw those lines, that we make sure we have a Republican speaker that's working with a Republican Lieutenant Governor and a Republican Governor to make sure that those redistricting lines, which is all this is about, and why $150 million of Democrat money was poured into the state, was try to make sure that doesn't happen. Our goal is to make sure that it does happen.
I think they have a plan, was the question. I don't think it's a good plan. I think it's a very bad plan. And if the plan to keep Texas red was to make sure the Democrats could all go home and be happy with what happened, which they are. Democrats are very happy with this session, then I don't see a huge urgency. Look, I'm a Republican, okay, and I don't like the Democrats. But I'm not okay with sacrificing everything that we have to do and asking you to sacrifice everything that you do for the results that we just got. It's not good enough. And the folks that I talk to, and I'm not just talking about folks like you who show up to things like this and are politically plugged in and engaged. The average everyday person thinks we spend too much money at the budget group. The average person thinks that their property taxes are too high, and they want that cut, not the future growth cut. And I feel like there were some good measures, but at the end of the day, I just feel like we needed more. And if we are worried about Texas turning blue, then I think we should have looked at this session as our last opportunity to show Texans why Texas is great. Because we have limited government, we believe in personal responsibility, and I think that's what motivates people. Ronald Reagan, when he swept the nation and turned it red, did not apologize for his conservative values. He looked at the opposition, he looked at the people who were trying to grow government, and he declared war on liberalism. That's what we should have done. Donald Trump didn't run to the middle on any of this stuff. He went far to the right, and he spoke to people that hadn't been spoken to in a long time. And I think we turned Texas blue faster by running away from our base and giving our people no real hope and results faster than what we have done. So I think there is a plan, I just don't agree with it.
A little bit about the spending that takes place, and so what most people don't understand, especially those that have never started on finance or appropriations, is that reducing property taxes, in other words, buying down even future growth of property taxes, actually cost us against the budget. And so when we limit to 2.5 school finance spending on growth on local property taxes, that's about a $5 billion hit to the budget. And so it's the way the budget process works on that. And so that is counted as spending. The other thing we encountered this cycle, which was a 500-year flood. In other words, we had people, Texans across the state, who were not told to get flood insurance because they weren't in a 100-year flood plain. Those that they bought their house from, those that financed their mortgage, did not require them to have flood insurance. And 95% of those who lost their property, who lost their business, who lost their homes, were devastated financially because they lost those assets. They lost their largest piece of asset that they have ever accumulated, and they lost it to a flood that was a 500-year flood, and they had no flood insurance. And so, literally as a state, we spent billions of dollars on the flood insurance. Now, was it, no pun intended, the perfect storm of having Harvey disaster funding take place at the same time that we were going to spend billions of dollars on school finance? And I say billions of dollars because I know, Jonathan, you didn't vote for the school finance bill because it didn't help out Hershey-Lewis Bedford, your school district, enough. In other words, it didn't flush enough money through this process.
That was one of the reasons, but that was the only reason.
That they would have gained enough money. But then the argument is that we spent too much money. And the reality is we had so many Band-Aids on school finance, where we had acetar, we had golden pennies, where we had copper pennies, so that there were so many little Band-Aids on this thing, literally 7 different tweaks to the formula, that ripping that Band-Aid off and getting us back to a much simpler formula, and yet doing it in a way that the majority of school districts across the state would not lose money, and we could hold your property taxes down to a 2.5% growth rate from here to legislature changes it, which is really significant. Now, bear in mind, inflation's 3%. So if you hold it to 2%, 2.5%, you're gaining every year because inflation's 3 and you're held to 2.5. That costs billions of dollars. It's going to cost us billions of dollars the next time we come in just to cover that money that is not your local property taxes that we're spending at a state level, which is how recapture works. So 44% of recapture was reduced with state monies. And so it's very, very difficult to argue we didn't spend enough on education, yet we spent too much money in our budget when the vast majority of our budget is on education. And then it's very difficult as an appropriator, somebody who's on finance, looking at the devastation that a 500-year flood caused people, businesses, and the negative and the economic impact of it to the state of Texas, and not coming forward as a state and saying we're going to help you, we're going to do something about it, including limiting what local taxing entities can tax those individuals with property. One of the things we did is we had local entities that refused to do reappraisals on devastated property. And so a lot of that cost the state money, and we spent billions of dollars on Harvey, and we spent billions of dollars on making sure that we bought down property taxes so that you don't see the 6-7% growth that you see year after year, which compounded is really, really significant. literally billions of dollars moving forward.
Well, let me, since I was addressed, I'd like to respond. So, Senator Hancock, who missed our eloquent, we all love each other, but we may disagree speech at the start, and is getting a few jabs. We do all love each other and support each other, we just disagree on some stuff. So he brought up the fact that I complained that Hurst Euless Bedford ISD did not get enough money in their first part. And there's a big difference. I complained that they didn't get their fair share. Okay? And if we're going to start handing out money, which was very clear that was the intention of the legislature, I believe as a representative for House District 92, I have a responsibility to fight that my people are going to get their fair share. When a kid in Hurst Euless Bedford ISD is going to get, at that time, $200 increase per kid per year. And I've got Fort Worth ISD, who's been getting nothing but F's and failing, and scandal after scandal is getting $1,300 per kid. Wow. You bet your rear end I'm going to stand up and say something. So it wasn't that I was happy with the amount of money. I was okay and have said publicly that for school districts who are performing at the level that some of the ones we enjoy here in Northeast Tarrant County are, that I'm okay with rewarding excellence. Good teachers who have proven results that are bringing home stuff, I'm okay with investing more there. But the problem is the way the school finance was done, and this was the other part of my school finance no-vote, was instead of talking about property tax relief first, it was an afterthought. And reducing people's bills came after we're going to put all this money in. I wanted it to be a part of the conversation because the amount of property tax relief that was included in that first version was not enough. And I'm glad I held out because it got better, okay? I still think it was not as good as we could have done, but it was moved, the ball moved to the right in that regard. So just want to clear up that statement.
And if I could add one thing on the property tax, I know everybody's frustrated on property tax. Laura, I can see it on your face as we're talking, and I get it. Yeah, I get it. But I think what it shows is the fact that we cannot rely on the state to lower your property taxes as much as you want it to. We're talking about $5 billion. As it was said earlier, we're just slowing the rate of growth. You're exactly right. Because the people who are responsible for lowering your taxes where you want it to be is at the local level. We can't, if you're going to want the state to do it, and it's partly our fault. I think we need to take the blame because we talked about it going into session, property tax relief, and we wanted, and we did a lot within the constraints of what we had on the budget. Even went over some of the budget numbers we've done in the past to get that property tax relief. But we're kind of where we're at, and I think it shows the limitations on what the state can do to bring you that property tax relief, so we need to be vigilant. I think Fran Rose put this in an email the other day, or something that I saw. You got to be on your local elected officials to make sure they're bringing down those property taxes. And that 2.5% on schools, they can't go above that with a vote. I don't know if people understand, that's a hard cap. They can't come to you and say, we want more money over 2.5%. They are capped at 2.5%. They can't go over that, which means the state's going to have to put in more money for those public education dollars, but it also means the schools cannot run away with their finances anymore. Even if they come to the voters to get voter approval, they can't even do that. And 3.5 is an automatic vote for the people in the other localities, which last session, if you remember, we had a special session, we were arguing between 6% and 4%. And we would have loved to have taken 4%. This time we got 3.5, which I think is really good. Again, there's more work to be done. I know why you're frustrated. I get it, and we need to keep working on it. Senator Hancock had one of the best bills of the entire session, which was Senate Bill 1891, which would put in a constitutional spending limit to population plus inflation. I texted him the day it was out of the Senate and said, hey, can I pick that up in the House? And I worked it as hard as I could for 3 or 4 weeks to the Appropriations Committee trying to get that burden out. It wasn't there yet. That's going to be one of the first bills I file next session that we work on. I'd love to work with Senator Hancock again. He's done it a couple sessions. But if we just did that, it'll be your 4th time. Then we'll do it the 4th time. Then he's doing it. To me, Senate Bill 1891, look at it. That was one of the most significant pieces of legislation the Senate passed that we didn't do that I'm hoping the House can pass next time, because that will limit our budget growth to population plus inflation. Then I had another bill that said anything over that goes to property tax relief, and some could go to education if it wanted to, but it has to go to property tax relief. I think that's a better mechanism for doing this.
We can move on. I was just going to say, I think what they said about them raising the cap was a great thing. Kelly's bill was a great thing. I supported it every time since I've been in there. Just get ready for those school bond elections, because that's what's coming next.
Yeah.
We didn't do that.
And actually, we looked at that, and the reality is we looked at the school bond elections. Unless they have copper pennies, which I'm guessing most people here don't understand copper pennies. Right, and so unless they have copper pennies, in other words, unless they bought it down 15 cents, most school districts have, with the 50 cents that the legislature bought down property taxes a decade ago, most of them went up to their 50% cap. So they're already capped on their interest in sinking, in other words, their bond elections. And so what they're doing now is as they pay off the bonds, rather than passing those tax savings along, they're just selling more bonds. But the reality is most of them around here that did not do the copper pennies, which is buying it down 15 cents and creating a threshold there on the INS, doing a swap. Most of them do not have the capacity, which is why we looked at it, to actually sell a lot more bonds. They can keep the bond, they can keep the amount of bonded capacity they have, but they cannot sell more. And I assure you, as a business employee that pays not only for my home, but I pay over $3,000 per employee on property taxes because I pay on my building, my warehouse, I pay on my inventory, and I pay on all my trucks that my drivers drive. So I'm spending, which is $3,000 I can't give in bonuses or pay increases, $3,000. And so as a business owner and a property owner and a homeowner, I am thrilled to know that moving forward, I'm not going to get, and as a business owner, as a homeowner, you get a 10% cap is the way it used to be. Now it's 3.5% on what your appraisal could go up. As a business owner, there was no cap on it. My business could go up 20%, and there was no cap on it. 20% on businesses. And so I am thrilled to see that we're limited now on 2/3 of my property tax bill to a 2.5% growth, and that I'm limited to 3.5% on cities and counties, which is a much smaller portion. Moving forward, that's significant. That is a 3% savings the first year, it's 7% the next year, and you just start compounding it, it's closer to 10% the year after, 10% savings the year after that. So as we keep moving forward, both businesses are going to benefit from it, but homeowners, I mean, you're going to, moving forward, save billions and billions and billions of dollars across the state on this property tax reform that, again, first time in 38 years and never before without a court mandate has taken place. And someone who pays $3,000 per employee for property taxes, I'm tickled pink about it.
Okay, so it's safe to say, Jonathan, you alluded to it by traveling the state. The Grassroots, we recognize it was a purple session and they're angry, okay? It's reflected in these questions. It's reflected in the temperature in this room, everybody fanning themselves. So, you know, we're not really snowed by, it's just gonna be a tense conversation. I just want you guys to all know that. And it's the truth, that's why we're here. That's why we have a tea party, is to push back. So, next tense question. What are your thoughts on Speaker Bonin's threats of political revenge against members who campaign against incumbents, both Democrats and Republicans? Since when are Republicans not supposed to campaign against Democrats?
I don't care what he says. Yeah, I haven't talked to the speaker since session's over. I don't think I'm going to after tonight either. I just think it was really poor judgment too. Like I just, how do you win a war if you don't name the enemy? And I just think it was really short-sighted. And I think, one of the frustrating things is like Strauss was an enemy to liberty and limited government. But you could kind of scare Strauss into doing good things with enough pressure. We passed some very significant legislation that everyone in this room would be happy about under him. And, so it really has been a weird situation in some ways, hey, passed red light camera ban, that was a huge bill. The speaker helped me on that. But then I turn around and I feel like he knifed me in the back on a lot of other things, and it's very confusing, but I think that is one of the dumbest comments I've heard anyone say. is that we're not going to campaign against Democrats. And I hope that it was a slip of the tongue, but I haven't heard a correction, so I don't know.
Well, you know, a lot of times, and Representative Stickland and Senator Hancock can tell you, a lot of times to get things, and I don't want this to sound bad, but to get things done and to be able to get lasting reforms like SB2 and HB3 done, you have to have good relationships within the body. And people, as much as you don't want to think they're like this, if you campaign against them in a primary or general, they will shut you off during session if you do that. Now, you may think that's dumb, you may think that's smart, it's just human nature. And so I think Representative Bonin has said over and over again, if I'm going to spend 5-6 months away from my family, from my business, from all those people, I want to make sure we're getting some things done that we need to get done. And I think you saw from a lot of folks that SB2, HB3, some of those big transformational things that were done this session, they want to keep doing those kind of things. And so that wasn't saying that this group can't go and campaign against anybody they want to in the primary or the general. It didn't mean the grassroots can't do what they want to. He just understands, he's been there so long, that those interpersonal things between members can make the difference between getting things done and not getting things done. And I think that's where he was coming from at it. And so I think that's why he said it.
But not being in the House, I don't, whatever.
You read that.
Whatever. But I will tell you, when the reality is we're holding on to the House by 8 seats that won by very tight margins, flip this. Because we had a significant number of Democrats that worked diligently on displacing a number of Republicans, and frankly were very successful at it, which is why we were as tight as it was this last section, as well as an anomaly with Beto and Krause on the, you know, it was just I think it was an anomaly, but I don't want to guess that it's an anomaly. And so the other thing it does is you flip it on the other side, it sends a message loud and clear. Republicans held the House by 8 seats, and it sends a message to those Democrats that want to, you know, they want to pass legislation, as Matt said, and they want to be in positions of leadership. That I know that y'all didn't like it, and conservatives didn't like it, and first blush you go, okay, that kind of makes me mad. But you flip it and realize that same message was sent to every Democrat that frankly they were much more successful than Republicans at getting out and working against the opposite party. And so I think that message was, it didn't settle well with our grassroots, but I'm sure it put a few Democrats in the House on notice.
Yeah, I think if you looked at social media right before the last election, there were scores more posts about Democrats in Republican districts, helping them win in some vulnerable districts where they were. And for your Morgan Myers, Angie Chin Buttons, Matt Shaheen's, Jeff Leach's, he doesn't want that influence carrying over into there as well. So again, going back, do they have a plan? I think they do have a plan. I think Bonin knew what he was saying when he was saying that. You may not agree with it, but I do think he knows what he was doing when he said that.
I don't think it was just a message to the Democrats, because what a lot of you may not know is months before this statement was ever made, there was a change in the Republican caucus bylaws in the Texas House that was pushed by the leadership team. And that became the rule. And it was specifically just about Republicans, and it was about Republicans campaigning against each other. And you would lose your membership to the Republican caucus if you did so. So I can agree in part with what Senator Hancock is saying on that statement, but when you couple it with the other actions, it seemed pretty one-sided. It also seemed one-sided when you specifically come out and say, hey, if I'm not speaker, this progressive liberal Democrat from El Paso, Joe Moody, he'd be a great speaker. You can't decouple some of these comments. And it seemed planned, it seemed deliberate, and accompanied with everything else that was done, I think that it was very poor judgment.
So recognizing that it was a purple session, I think and a lot of people, I'm not just speaking for myself, believe that the leadership is who should be held responsible, the big three. Yep. So this question refers to Abbott. Is there a chance that Governor Abbott will call a special session to get the Republican Party's priorities passed, including the heartbeat bill, voter integrity, and monument protection?
Not a chance.
No.
Nope, he's already said no.
Yeah, I think, again, we go back to, the entire focus is on redistricting and making sure that we shore up some of the districts that we almost lost. Look, you know, Hirsch-Ulis Bedford district should not be a win by 49%. And so, I mean, it is, we've got to look at, and everything's focused on redistricting, and that's where the mindset is. I mean, that's just where it is. And if you'll notice, I mean, that's kind of where everybody's kind of focused on, because there is nothing more important, not only to Texas, but literally the nation, than to make sure that we maintain the Texas House. Because we have to maintain the Texas House to going into redistricting, because if you look at the nation, we lose Texas, we lose the nation, and there's no other place to go.
Well, I think this is, you know, what Kelly said is correct, but here's the problem with it. I feel like when I win an election, and the last one was closer than I think any of us wanted, I was in another district campaigning for another representative when we got the results. We didn't send out any mailers. The Obama PAC that came in sent out 12 in the last few days of early voting. It caught us off guard. I think those numbers are a little bit skewed, but here's the problem, and you know, I'm not saying these individuals, but there's a sickness in Austin where everyone's worried about one thing, and it's re-election, and it's stupid, and it goes with the wind. Look, I swore an oath to protect, you guys sent me down there for 2 years, one session, to go do a certain set of things. And that is more important to me than being a freaking state representative 2 years from now. And I think it's the problem just in general with the way that we look at it. And I do think we need to be strategic, and I do want Republicans to win, and I want us to be in control, but not at the expense of the legislation that was killed, because we're worried about that. I'm worried about Texas now. When I came 2 years before me and Matt came into the Texas House, the state budget, all funds, rainy day fund, federal fund drawdown, everything, was less than $175 billion. We just passed a budget that's over $250 billion. 8 years later, under Republican leadership. That's our fault. It's our failure. We need to own it, and we're going to continue to grow government if we're worried about the next 2 years. Let's take the shot when we have the shot and have no regrets.
Yeah.
Okay, this is from an 18-year-old new voter. As a hunter and competitive shooter, how are you going to keep my firearms, which are my path to college, and my suppressors safe from the clutches of the left and of Trump?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. What he did on bump stocks, I think, was unconstitutional. President Trump should have never done that. In fact, I've had a piece of legislation for the last 3 sessions, or 4 sessions actually, number 5 hopefully next time will be the charm, but it said anytime that the state of Texas has a firearm, or anytime the federal law has a law on firearms or firearm ammunition that's contrary to Texas public policy, then we're not going to enforce it. And so the feds can do what they want if they want to, but they don't have the manpower, the resources, the energy to come in and enforce those things. So I think, and it's perfectly constitutional, comes out of a 1989 Supreme Court case, Prince versus United States, that says the federal government cannot compel states to enforce their laws for them. They can put a carrot, they can put a stick, but they can't compel them to. And so I think, especially in firearms, firearm ammunition, we need to say, hey, if your law is contrary to what Texas public policy law is, we're not going to help you enforce that. So I think that's one thing we can do. There was a lot of talk, if you remember, about red flag laws going into session. That's one area where I was pretty proud of my Freedom Caucus colleagues, Matt Shaheen, Mike Lane, Matt Schaefer, and some others. We had meetings with the governor and other leadership right from the beginning of session and said, we're just not going to countenance that. We're not going to have that. And so those bills really never saw the light of day. And so I think we have to continue to keep pushing back against those kinds of things. But I think Texas is still a very constitutional carry, I know, is what everybody wanted to get past this session in here. And I'm with you. I've signed on every time you filed that bill, I've signed on as a co-author. So I'm right there with you on that. But absent that, I think we took some steps on the Second Amendment to strengthen Second Amendment freedoms this session. I know I had House Bill 1791 cities and local governments were continuing to skirt open carry laws by taking advantage of loopholes, so we tightened that up. There have been 9 Attorney General opinions and 2 lawsuits in the last couple of years since we instituted open carry because the local governments were trying to get around that. We're making sure that they can't do that anymore by reinforcing the laws. We did some other things as well. So I think Second Amendment rights are still very important here in Texas. We're going to continue to keep fighting those, and I think we're going to be very successful at it.
I mean, we're spending $800 million every biennium to do the federal government's job on the border. I think we're busy enough doing the federal government's job protecting our border that anything that they attempt to do regarding threats to our Second Amendment, I don't see that, at least the DPS officers I know aren't going to be waiting in line to enforce that.
I agree with what they was.
Okay, this is for Senator Hancock. You were an early sponsor of the Mental Health Consortium. My question is, when a teacher or a counselor labels a child that they find is a threat to themselves or others, and yet they are not given parental consent to connect that child with one of the higher education or psychiatric associates of the state, what happens?
Well, I mean, that is one of the questions and one of the things that we asked, and as part of that, there were some great concerns on there. When you're talking about mental health, I served on the Public School Safety Task Force that traveled the state and heard testimony on it. We heard witnesses come in. What we're trying to do in that is address the Santa Fe situation before Santa Fe shows up. And those are very difficult challenges before us in making sure that we maintain parental rights, but yet we don't allow parental protection of somebody that could do harm to others. And so it is a very delicate balance. Frankly, I think what you'll probably see is adjustments to that legislation as we move forward. It was a step to try to address an issue as we see gun violence in an attempt to try to address it. I think you'll continue to see as we move forward tweaks to that legislation in addressing some of these areas of concern.
Okay, okay. I missed your answer, sorry, we're looking at new questions. Okay, this one is, yes, it was, okay. Matt Krause.
Yes.
Why did you vote yes on increasing state spending?
Well, yeah, and that's always the conundrum with the budget, right? Because like we talked about earlier, 90 million, or I guess it ended up being 78 million or so, went to alternatives to abortion, which was unprecedented, and I think it's going to save a lot of lives. We did have 800 million towards border security, which I thought was really good. We had some great human trafficking pieces in there, but we also got to $5 billion in tax relief. And so, and I know there's thoughts out there that that's what we weren't fighting for the whole time. We had to be dragged along, but I got to tell you, I was in meeting after meeting where some of the most conservative members in the House were saying, hey, 2.7 billion is not going to cut it. We got to find other ways to do it. When Glenn Hager came out and said they found an extra $500 million, a lot of us said that all needs to go towards tax relief. And so we kept working and working on that tax relief. And when it got up to $5 billion, I thought, okay, it's spending a little bit more, but I think it's going to do a lot of good in the long run. So coupled with all those other things, yes, when we're spending that much, there are some bad things. Hey, thank you. How are you doing? Good to see you. When there's certainly things you can point to and say, maybe we shouldn't have been spending money here, but there's a lot of things you can point to that I thought were good, and with the extra $5 billion in tax relief coming in, I felt like I should support that since that's where I've been working for and lobbying for a long time with a lot of the leadership and the chairman of Ways and Means and others, and so that's why I voted for the budget.
Thank you. This one is for Jonathan. What advice would you give to a new House member who wants to honor what his constituents sent him to Austin to do, but he is being pressured by Republican leadership to do the very opposite?
Are the kids gone? For me, you get every one of us gets to make a choice, and it's very hard to be popular in Austin and be popular back at home with groups like this. So you get to choose, and it's very hard to walk a tightrope if you don't make a clear choice. It gets uncomfortable for a lot of folks. I've chosen over the years, and I think there's a price to pay, and I think there's good and bad that come with it, but to legislate like it's my last chance. And when you're not concerned about whether you're coming back and you're focused on the now, it makes things so much easier. And the problem is that the first time you capitulate to pressure is the start of constant pressure. Because once you bend once, they just amp it up because they know that they can continue to do it. I haven't seen really anyone that I can think of who has bended to pressure in a big way and recovered from it. It's even more painful. You end up making it harder for yourself. So I would encourage them. I know you don't know much as a freshman right now, but understand every action that you have has a consequence, and you need to be as aware of that. I mean, that's the big dirty secret. You get locked in early when you don't know the ramifications. And with that being said, I come across as this hardcore person that won't even try and work. I did try and work with a lot of folks, and I think we successfully did so on some things. But in general, I think we're spending too much. I'm overtaxed. We're killing children. I'm worried about someone taking my guns, and I don't have a whole lot to negotiate with anymore. I feel like our back's against the wall, and so just sticking to that. And the other thing is having accountability partners. There are people in this room who know that they can get me at 12:30 at night if I'm still awake, and giving them that access and putting yourself out there. Another trick I've learned over the last couple of years is if you anticipate a tough position coming up, go ahead and just throw it out there publicly, and then they know you can't back down from it. So I'd be like, I already said I was going to do this amendment. I can't back down now. And that kind of alleviates some of the pressure that you might face. So when in doubt, bring some light to the situation. Listen to the people who got you there. Allow them to hold you accountable, and don't just surround yourself with yes men.
Okay, I'm going to ask this next question because I know it needs to be addressed, but you guys, I don't want to spend the whole rest of the time talking about this, okay? Okay. Why didn't anything get done with the total stopping of Robin Hood?
They didn't want to.
Well, I'll let the budget, well, I'll say this. Robin Hood has turned into an animal of epic proportions. It is so much money and so big and so ingrained in the current financial thing that it is like I don't think there was fiscally enough money to deal with it completely. I'm disappointed because I feel like the best chance we had was with the current situation where we had a surplus of money, and it seemed to be second or even third in the list of priorities in regards to education. It seemed to me that we decided to make the Democrats happy first. I do think the Republican leadership wanted to do something about it, and we got a few crumbs off the table, but it's not lasting. And it's a simple math problem, and this is the problem once you put these things out there, is you have a majority of people in Texas and representatives and school districts who benefit from them. So fighting back as the minority is absolutely a mountain to climb, and very tough, and in this case very expensive, and there just wasn't the willpower to do it, I don't think.
Well, it is a math problem, but our math's a little bit different on that. It's difficult to say we spent too much money and then say we didn't address Robin Hood on doing that. Recapture, we spent $5-6 billion on recapture. Again, holding school districts to 2.5. If inflation grows to 3.5, which is we never saw under Obama, but we're seeing under Trump, what happens at the 2.5 is you continue to buy into that recapture year in and year out. So no, we did not have, oh, heck, I don't know how many billions of dollars you would have cost the state. Another 15 billion, roughly, is more, how much more, or 10 billion more we would have had to spend to address recapture. And it's growing. Now recapture in another 7 years would be more in recapture dollars paying for education than state funds, general revenue paying for education. That's where your recapture goes. By holding down at the 2.5, the way the math works is that the only way that every year the economy grows at anything above 2.5, you're continuing to buy down or recapture in future growth. And so the future growth allows you to continue, that the state's portion continues to increase as local recapture or your property taxes going to Austin will continue to decrease. So over a period of time, that is how you look at it at a long term. Now, the argument is, why didn't we buy down more? It's just a simple fact of how much more money did y'all want us to spend as a state? Because that's already 40% of our budget. Health Human Services is 40% of our budget. And so that's kind of where you get into is saying we should have bought down and recapture more and saying we shouldn't have spent as much. Those equations don't work. But with the formula that we're on at the 2.5 that the governor set out, what you'll see as long as the economy grows, you'll consider the portion of recapture going to education will continue to decline over a period of time. No, we did not have, an extra $15 billion to $20 billion in state spending to completely do away with recapture, and that's frankly what it's gotten to. I mean, it's $15 to $17 billion in recapture on top of what the $5 billion that we spent on it. And so it is a math problem, but it's a math problem you can't fix in one session. You can fix it as the sessions move forward, as long as you hold down and compress property taxes from schools to a 2.5. And frankly, the 2.5 next session gets very expensive. So every biennium, the billions of dollars that we'll have to spend on state monies, state resources versus local property taxes is literally in the billions, and it escalates based on student enrollment and inflation.
Well, let me say this, because we kind of keep having this go back and forth, and I want to be clear. You can do it, okay? I am saying, no, hold on, let me explain. Because almost all the money that we did spend that I think was too much should have been reappropriated over here, okay? And we could have accomplished a lot of these things. I'll give you, for instance, in the school.
I mean, if you say we can do it and I say we can't, how much would we have to spend?
Could we have doubled it?
Tell me how much we would have to spend.
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but Robin Hood in and of itself, here's part of the problem. When you have...
Well, you said we can do it, so I just want to know how many billions of dollars would we have to find somewhere else to completely do away with recapture?
I do not know the number off the top of my head, but what I'm saying is most of the money in the school bill, you can come out and say that we need to reward good teachers and we need to put more money into the classroom and not spend over $6 billion in new money. Because most of that new money was going to rewarding bad actors. I'll give you, for instance, in HEB ISD, we ended up with an extra $316 per kid. This is an A-plus school district who is at a $1.04 tax rate, which is one of the lowest in the state. If you were under $1.05 under this school finance, you didn't get a large portion of the incentives that were offered out. If you had gone all the way up to your max tax rate and you were a school district like Fort Worth ISD, even though you've been registered as a failure over and over and over again, then you're getting over $800 per kid. That is a big problem to me. So I can get up here and say we should reward excellence, we should reward good teachers, we should be smart with our money, and not spend all of it. Everybody wants to loop all of that in together, and you don't have to. We could have gone and said, if you have been at the max tax rate, we're not going to reward you with more dollars. Because that's what the current school finance plan did by buying down the pennies. So if you cut all that up and you had put it into Robin Hood, you get rid of a huge chunk of it. Now, you have to mess with the formulas because, as you said, this is getting worse and worse and worse. But you could have bought down a significant more amount of money of people who are being taxed at the max tax rate, and their money is being taken and redistributed, in this case, to failing communities. Why is it fair that a school district in Northeast Tarrant County is getting between $8,000 and $10,000 a kid, but you go out into the middle of nowhere into one of these small school districts and they're getting $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 per kid? I'm sorry, I believe in voting with your feet. And if you choose to live out in the middle of nowhere, you should know you're not going to get the amenities and the stuff that we have here, and you shouldn't ask us to pay for equaling the playing field.
That sounds great if there wasn't a court ruling and we didn't have to obey court rulings. So court rulings require equity, and as long as the courts have say-so, which we do, then frankly, those kids that are living in colonias, right? Those kids that are legal citizens, even
Not all of them.
living in poor areas, that the courts require a certain amount of equity, and so there is equity that is a requirement. I mean, there are districts in the Panhandle that are very mineral rich, and they're paying a lot of property taxes on that. They don't have a lot of kids, and so yeah, I mean, they may be getting $16,000 per student, but they're also sending millions of their local in recapture and to go into some of these other areas. Hershey, Bedford, Birdville, a lot of the districts around here are kind of in that in-between area. But we addressed 44% of recapture again. I have a pretty good idea of what the number is rather than guessing, but
What is it?
It would have, I just
I'll
said,
put it on you. What is it?
I just said about $17 billion of additional spending is what we would.
In 1 year? In the first year?
In the biennium, yes. And it continues to grow at 2.5. That number will continue to grow every biennium. So every session from here on out, you're going to see that number grow because of suppressing, holding down local property taxes when you have student enrollment and inflation growth. So if student enrollment goes up and inflation at 3%, we pay for student enrollment and inflation growth. If inflation grows 3% and your property tax is limited to 2.5%, that 0.5% delta is the percentage for every student or every property owner. That percentage is state funds that have to increase. And so literally, I think the number that we're anticipating right now, not knowing what our student enrollment growth is, on top of what we did this time for education, it is just going into a $2.8 billion of more money that we know, plus student enrollment growth, plus inflation, just based on the 2.5% buy-down. I mean, it is extremely complicated, and it's very easy to sit there and make statements, but school finance is one of the most complicated things. That's why it's a 300
But it's complicated.
bill, and incentive pay is only $150 million. So we're not rewarding of good teaching. I mean, it's $150 million out of a $9 billion bill. I mean, it's not that significant. But we are required as a state to make sure that we provide equitable funding across the state so that we don't have winners and losers. And the reality is frankly, kids in our districts, the average white kids performing well in the state of Texas. We're underperforming significantly or in our minority populations. Not Asian, but in our minority populations. And those are growing numbers in population. So our education system, if you just measure the white kids, we're doing fine. But if you take the rest of the population into account, we are not performing well. We have 40% in third grade that cannot read at a third grade level. And frankly, we quit teaching reading after third grade. And you are expected to read to learn, not learn to read after third grade. And that's not happening with those minority populations that we have to address. And so yes, there's additional funding trying to address the problems that we have in education and where we're lagging behind the nation, and frankly, where the nation is lagging behind the world.
Well, maybe if we were actually teaching just reading and writing and things that really matter. Social crap that we don't need to be teaching, that needs to be left to the home and the church and the community, not teachers.
Amen.
And as someone who's on school board for 13 years, I
Yeah.
fought for that for 13 years, and I encourage you to get involved in your local elections.
Absolutely, ma'am, and will continue to do so.
And I do want to address, because it is, in this circumstance, I know Senator Hancock worked very hard on a lot of these numbers. In fact, he's one of the smartest numbers guys in the state. And it is easy as someone who isn't on appropriations to come up here and say that. But I think it's a lie, and I think it's the intent of the folks in Austin, I'm not saying Kelly, to make this thing seem so complicated that none of us can understand, and you have to send us back because we'll figure it out eventually. Yeah. It's very simple. Every single one of us in this room, I think, believes that we're paying too much, that government is too big, and frankly, I'm not really excited about where we're headed in our public education system. I'm just not. And what we did is reward a lot of bad actors. And if you don't believe me, ask the Democrats who all supported this plan, because they love it.
I just want to throw my 2 cents in, Kelly. Kelly, I have a question, just real quick. So if the answer to the Hispanics or whatever the non-whites are that aren't learning to read, is there proof that throwing more money at them is going to teach them to read?
That's why it's a 300-page bill, because what a lot of people wanted us to do is keep the same old system, right, and just put more money into it, which we didn't do for the first time ever without a court mandate. And so we come, and Senator Taylor, who's a good friend of mine and chair of education, was much more advanced in there. Look, your local school districts, here's what they want to do. They want to pay every teacher based on tenure. So, because it's simpler, right, to say, you've been here 10 years, we're going to pay you here for 10 years. Dallas ISD, which is kind of the example across the state, basically rewards those that are willing to take on the more difficult students. And they have teachers making $90,000 versus what happens in most of your districts. If you're a teacher and you really want to take care of your family and you want to earn more income, forget trying to negotiate. You don't get to negotiate. It's based on years of service and maybe a $2,500 stipend. Therefore, what do? We take some of our best teachers and we move them to the ad building, where they're no longer teaching our students. You want to improve basic skills? Keep our best teachers in the classroom, which means paying them, which means you cannot pay based on a career ladder, which is what the vast majority of them do. What we've done in this legislation, if we said, literally, you can't do that anymore. You cannot, the legislation says, you cannot pay purely based on number of years service. So on tenure. So it requires a school district to actually do what most businesses do and recognize performance, and that performance cannot purely be a test, a STAR test, but you and I know how to measure performance, right? You know, is the kid active and encouraged in school? Does he want to do his homework? Yes. Is he engaged? Yes. I mean, there's ways that, but we have to change, frankly, a very socialistic system that's purely based on tenure, and it doesn't matter that, frankly, you give some of our worst teachers the AP classes because they have the best students, and therefore they don't have any problems with those AP classes because the kids will teach the class, rather than saying we're going to make sure that we're making the most of our best teachers, we're going to reward them, we're going to quit basing everything off purely tenure, and that's what this legislation does. It really tries to change, and it was a fight. I mean, it was a fight, and I saw it play out. And so it was a fight because we're changing the structure of education in the state of Texas, and Mike Morath, who's TE, and helped implement a lot of the changes that are in Dallas right now, that we've seen improvement, we've seen performance, we've seen these ideas put into practice and make a difference in kids, minority kids, African American kids, Hispanic kids, improving and literally turning around. One of the lowest performing schools in Dallas County is now, in Dallas ISD, is now one of the top performing. Why? Because we rewarded teachers and we sent some of the best teachers there, and we paid them not purely based on number of years experience. So what we've done in the state of Texas, and Mike Morath says, we've completely transformed that he anticipates Texas leading the nation in education in the next 5 to 7 years. And so it was so much more, and I encourage you to look at it. It is so much more than just putting money in. It is putting money and saying, you don't get to spend it the same way you've always done. And I get it, every superintendent, the easiest thing for you to do is say, go get me a career ladder based on number of years experience. That's all I need to know. This basically makes them train their administrators, their principals, and their teachers so that they can do, I mean, they get to draw it up a little bit so they can have teachers evaluating other teachers. And so the teachers can say, hey, this is the best performing teacher in our class. You need to reward them and pay them more. So y'all got to understand, what we've done for the first time without a core mandate ever is we have completely changed the way we're going to do education in the state of Texas and really applied kind of business principles. Is we're going to reward people, but we're going to allow those local districts and those local campuses to come up with the evaluation instruments and determine how do you differentiate. But you cannot pay them all the same ever again in the state of Texas.
And which is huge, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. Huge. Also part of HB3 is something called efficiency audits, which is also huge, which means when they go out to get their bonds, which they can still do when they go out to get their bonds, they've got to do an efficiency audit to show the voting public how they've used those funds before they want to take more of your money. So if the efficiency audit comes back,
water parks.
That's right, yeah, no more water parks. And so, I mean, there's things, structural changes. Somebody's saying it's so difficult because we've made it that way. Yeah, you're right, over the course of 30 or 40 years. HB3, I think, undoes a lot of that. And so, I mean,
They're not happy.
And it's not a panacea. You still got to have parent involvement. You still got to have community involvement if we're really going to get the educational system. We can't just rely on the education system, but we did a lot of good things in HB3 that I think are going to pay huge dividends going forward.
Well, I want to be clear, because while I'm frustrated with some aspects of HB3, I agree with everything these gentlemen just said. There were some very good aspects of it. I hate that they just pack on a bunch of other stuff. My biggest problem with HB3 was that I felt like we were rewarding some of the bad actors who were on the higher end of receiving funds. But these reforms, I do believe, are transformational in some of the ways. So I don't want to be completely negative in that sense.
Is there teeth in that if they don't perform what?
Yes.
There is some teeth in the changes.
We sent Jonathan to pick it against
All right, guys, we are out of time, but I have one that I have to ask you because I promised that I would. And Matt, it's going to kind of put you in the hot seat, and I think you probably anticipated this question. So, okay, this was your first session on Transportation Committee. Many are disappointed you filed a toll road bill to authorize foreign-owned toll roads when just last session you and the Freedom Caucus fought to kill them. You also voted for multiple bills on committee that would raise vehicle registration fees, as well as one that created a mega toll authority in the middle Rio Grande Valley, and other bills that grow government. We sent you there to lower taxes and limit government. Why would you vote for tax hikes and to expand government? And then there's like a whole list of bills.
Yeah, well, I'll tackle HB 1951, which was our transportation bill. And I'll tell you what, House Bill 1951 had 4 components to it. It had voter approval for all toll roads, it had toll cessation in it, and it had uniform billing, which we passed last session on TxDOT, and we wanted to take that to the tolling authorities. And then the 4th piece was, yes, you could enter into public-private partnerships. TxDOT could do it two a year, had to be over $1 billion, was very structured, was very limited. So I was looking at it. We have 1,000 people coming to Texas a day. Well, actually, 500 are, we heard from demographers, 500 are being born in Texas, and then 500 outside the state are coming in. So we've always had huge transportation needs. And the reason I voted last session against the CDA public-private partnership bill was because it was just a laundry list of projects without any structure, any limitations, anything with it. So to me, it's kind of like saying, well, you voted against Obamacare, so you don't want to do anything on healthcare. Well, no, that's because that was the absolute wrong approach to do that with. Here, what we were trying to do, and everybody says, well, we got Governor Abbott right now who said no more toll roads, we're not going to have those. Well, you know, if the prognosticators are true and Texas goes blue in a couple of years, all that's standing between you and unlimited toll roads everywhere is gone now. The Democrats saw that from 2008 to 2016, right? Do this legislation. No, our guy's got a pen and a phone. He's fine. He's going to keep all that in there. But now that he's gone, everything's being undone. So I thought, don't we want to, in case anything changes in the future, have structural reforms and changes to our transportation policy? I think if you were for SB2, which is voter approval after you go above a certain amount on property taxes, you want voter approval. You want voter approval for annexation. I figured you want voter approval if you want to have a toll road there. Some conservatives disagree, but a lot of conservatives agree. I didn't know anybody who was against toll cessation, except for the toll companies. I'd say the people who fought my bill the most were tolling authorities. They couldn't stand it. They hated the bill because there was so much in it that they did not like. So I thought toll cessation was huge. But you're never going to get, and Senator Hancock, correct me if I'm wrong, you said on Transportation Senate, are you ever going to get a pure toll cessation bill through? at all? No, you're not. And so you've got to do something to bring that in. So you've got to put something in that other people will want. So we thought by putting in uniform billing, any toll cessation, and then voter approval would get a bunch of the grassroots support, which I think it would have had. And then you have the public-private partnerships from the people who want to build more of those toll roads, but it's very limited, it's very structured, it's in there. And so once you do that, then you have a broad coalition. Now, we were able to bring the grassroots and the tolling authorities against our bill, so we unified everybody for once during session, and everybody was pretty pleased with that. I guess we were a unifier there, but that was my purpose behind it. I think Texas has to keep up with its transportation needs. I'm not philosophically opposed to a public-private partnership if it's done well and done in the way they've done it. I don't care if everybody said this is for Centra, who's the foreign-owned toll company. It had nothing to do with my thought process on it. I just wanted people to be able to build the roads that we need to build. And so that was my thought process on House Bill 1951. I still think it was a good bill. I know Fran still hates it wherever she is, and she's told me multiple times. She even included that on her list of things that went well this session that it died. So I get it, but I want to work with anybody who wants to come and work with me on transportation issues. If you've got a better way to do that than what I offered last session, God bless you, let's figure it out. I want to work with you. Even one of the grassroots groups that said I betrayed the conservative cause and that I was bought off by lobbyists, getting cozy with them, we worked with them all session up until the bill was dead. Just because I don't care. If you think my bill's bad, great, tell me, but let's improve upon it. Don't just say it's terrible and you're corrupt and you're bought off and then don't talk to me about it, because that doesn't help anybody, right? If you think that was a bad bill, let's start talking right now on ways we can improve our transportation in Texas. Let's move forward. I'd be great with that. If we could get a pure toll cessation bill through, let's run that. I joint authored Matt Shaheen's bill where he did that. I was great. I tried to push that, could get nowhere in the House. I'd be great with voter approval by itself. I'd be great with uniform billing by itself, but that's where the tolling authorities came out after us. So if there's ways to do that, let me know. I want to work with you. If you think my idea is bad, if there's ways to improve it, that's fine too. I'd love to work with you on it. But that was the purpose of why I filed that bill. I still think it was a good bill. I know a lot of people disagree with me, and that's okay, because I always tell people you have the right to be wrong. And so that's okay if you think I was wrong, but we'll keep working on it, especially in Tarrant County. Transportation is such a huge issue, and we got to keep working with it. We got to keep that conversation going. Even if it's not that bill, we need to do something.
What about the bills where you voted on committee that would raise vehicle registration fees?
Yeah, if I remember right, most of those bills were the local people got to vote whether they wanted those vehicle registration fees to increase or not. So kind of going with the process of, if you live in that place and you want your vehicle registration fees to go up to pay for your transportation infrastructure there, then you get to vote on that. So that was my thinking on those. You might disagree with that too, but if there's a local voter approval and the voters want that, I mean, we can talk about that. So that's where I was on those.
Okay, so we have like a whole stack of questions we didn't get to. I would encourage you guys to.
Kelly will stay after me.
Yeah. These guys have nothing to do all summer because session's over, and so they're going to take your questions. You just call them. But before we go, so I want to give you a chance to do your closing remarks if you want to. If you have anything you want to say, you're welcome to say it. But I do want you to say two things. I want you to give advice to the grassroots on what we can do better. And I want you to tell us something positive from the session, whether it's a funny story, we all like to laugh, or something, a good bill, something. A bad bill you stopped. Something that would encourage us, okay? Because right now we're all feeling very purple and disgusted. Okay? Yes. You can think about it if you want to.
Yeah. I want to address one thing in the last question. I don't think that I want to be clear, Matt Krause has never sold out. I think he gets tricked sometimes into the wrong position, and I told him that. But this is a strong man of God, and I don't think that he would make that. I think he would leave before he ever did that, so I want to put it this session was a purple session, and this session, I hope and pray, was not our last chance. Because if it is, I think we're going to be thinking about this session and talking about it a lot more in the future. And at that point, I think it'll be too late for a lot of things, including the whole country, because Kelly's right. If Texas goes, we're in big trouble. If anyone had asked me what my plan is for this session, It would have been to defeat the Democrats, but from a position of strength. I think it's very clear we've got some literal emergencies going on. If you haven't seen the numbers of people crossing the border illegally in Texas right now, it is a crisis, and it needs to be addressed. And we should have had some legislation to turn off the magnets and make that harder. That was an easy one to unite people who are just not motivated to get out and vote. We need them to come out. On the social issues, everyone I've talked to understands the easiest place for the conservative movement to go get votes is in the church. But when you can't differentiate yourselves from the people who are trying to destroy the family unit and don't value life, it makes it hard to get them to do anything. We should have done more on social issues. We should have done stuff to protect our voter integrity. Because I think we've got more than enough proof that says there are people who are affecting the outcomes with more than just their one vote. We should have gotten some voter reform done. And then we should have addressed the way that Democrats are being funded. And there's two very, very clear ways in which they're being funded. Number one, public sector union jobs. We should have done paycheck protection and cut off tens of millions of dollars that is being funneled to the Democrats. And we should have gotten rid of taxpayer-funded lobbying, where our tax dollars are being used against us and funneled through a system that is ending up funding our opponents as well. Those are 5 very simple things to have ensured, in my opinion, that Texas stay red. To keep our grassroots involved, to keep you coming back and fighting. These are the things you told us to go do. When 15,000 people got together in the state convention, you gave us a list of action items. And unfortunately, I don't think that we did enough. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that Donald Trump or somebody can come through here and give us some leadership and get us on fire again, but I can't get motivated by what we did. I'm scared to death of being lukewarm and spewed out of the mouth because we had a shot and we didn't take it. That doesn't mean there aren't good people up there. It doesn't mean that everyone up there is evil. Some people make a decision to grow government. That's what they're there for. Other people get sold a bill of goods that I don't think is good. Other people get tired. We've been fighting this fight for a long time. It's a total mixture of stuff, but at the end of the day, we've all got to come back and have these uncomfortable conversations. I feel good about my position. I don't always have all the answers, but I know that the answer is not growing government, and that's why I'm proud that I have fought against it every single time. As far as a good thing for everyone to do, you need to seek truth. You need to partner with people who are seeking truth. Because I think what we need to do is understand the grassroots are the only ones that are going to be able to change this state. Because not these 2 individuals, but most of the folks down in Austin are constantly trying to figure out what's the least amount of things that we can do to stay in power. And they respond to fear and they respond to pain. And we've got to figure out how to be louder and prouder and demand more than our enemies because they are energized right now. And I think that's part of the reason we got the purple session. As far as a good story, man, I had a lot of fun slaughtering bills on local and consent. I will tell you that the local and consent calendar was a huge victory because it wasn't near as bad as previous years. It was cleaned up. It was nice not to have Sophronia Thompson in charge of it and to have a Republican. I appreciate Jeannie Morrison. My staff was anticipating having to do a lot more work than we ended up having to do. So I think the local and consent calendar was a victory for conservatives and the way that that was reformed in the House. But there's always got to be somebody watching that process, or otherwise I think it'll revert back. But that was a big, good story of the session. And thank y'all.
Yeah, I'll go back to what was the unified discussion by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker before session ever started, was to address property tax reform and to completely change our education system, which both we accomplished, which frankly, again, I'll go back to, hadn't been done in 38 years. Y'all seen it. Y'all saw some of the heat that I took for wanting to change off 8%. And I'll go back, for y'all that don't know it, 8% was set when inflation was 10 and 12%. It was set by a guy who said, when inflation drops, which I don't know that we'll see it, then the legislature should come back and lower this 8% threshold for the voter approved rate, which is what we changed to, because nobody knows what a rollback rate is. And that used to take a petition even to get through. Now it's an automatic. And the heat we caught for trying to get it down to reflect our current inflation level. Literally, in 1981, they passed the rollback rate in 79, changed it to 8% in 81, and it has 40 years stayed there. While inflation, I mean, Obama years, 2.5% was not uncommon. So think about that. 4 times the rate of inflation, and we saw cities that were going up 7.9. They didn't want to go to, they wouldn't let voters decide, but they didn't have a problem letting it go to 7.9%. I'm doing it. That is 3.5 now for cities and counties. It's 2.5 for schools. And good luck to any legislature going to change that. We've said in our education system, the same old, where we just pour more money at it, ain't gonna work in Texas anymore. That's unacceptable. We're gonna see performance. We're gonna reward performers, and we're gonna address our issues, and we're gonna quit having a blind eye to the fact that we're falling behind with certain segments of our educational system, and we're gonna make sure that we address that and we get it fixed and we move forward on doing that. And so, frankly, I'm one that would say I'm very excited that I was part of a legislature that did something for the first time in 38 years to address your property taxes. That we did something on education to completely overhaul education without a court order for the first time ever in the state of Texas. Those are significant things. Now, would I like to have seen the print bill that we passed in the Senate? Would I like to see it passed? Absolutely. I plan on coming back next time. But I will also tell you that if we don't keep or gain seats in 2020 by being unified as a party and working together to make sure that we make sure we have a Republican speaker next time, then you're not gonna like the way redistricting goes. You're just not gonna like it. And so I would say focus on what you need to focus on, which is on the redistricting's coming, and we need to be prepared for it, and we need to make sure that we have a governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker that will be part of that redistricting panel, because I will tell you, we may vote on something, but the ones that draw those maps are the people I just named. That's who really do the hard work in drawing those redistricting maps, and that is crucial for our state, that's crucial for our nation. My favorite story from session was late in session. You know, we don't get to come home, and so on those last 2 weekends, and so we were going to go to the Senate floor at 1 o'clock on that Sunday. And so the Lieutenant Governor, several of the members, and we do a Bible study. I host a Bible study on Tuesdays, and we have 5, maybe 6 senators show up, bipartisan. I'm doing that. Capitol Commission hosted. The Lieutenant Governor, we decided we wanted to have a Sunday morning service that was put on by the senators. So the Lieutenant Governor asked me to organize that. And so I had, help me, Robin, with the people I had to do it. So I had, Senator Lucio was going to start us in prayer, but he's Catholic, so he had Mass starting at the same time. So he did that. So Charles Perry, Republican, so we had Democrat, then Republican. Charles Perry then ended up leading us in prayer and asked him to share a few verses, which he did on doing that. And then after Charles prayed, I'd asked Senator Paxton, Senator Powell, who sings in her church choir, and then Senator Taylor, who I knew sang as well, to sing, and they had found out that I used to sing in our worship team, so they asked me to join with them. So we had a quartet that led those senators and their wives, and it was just for senators and their spouses or significant others. So we ended up having 30, 36, maybe there, somewhere in there, that was in a committee room. And so we led the singing in Amazing Grace, and then Senator Watson, who went to Baylor, a little bit before me, he shared, very touching, talked about his father and shared a verse and shared a short little message. Then I shared a message, scripture and talked about that. And then Dean Whitmire, Democrat, not known for going to church, asked us all to join hands, and we all recited the Lord's Prayer together in that room. And it was, and I will tell you, we have pictures of Lieutenant Governor on the last verse of Amazing Grace with Dean Whitmire wiping tears from his eyes. He's been there 44 years. 44 years, 22 sessions. Wiping tears from his eyes as we sang the last verse of Amazing Grace. And then we held hands, everybody in that room, and recited the Lord's Prayer. What we didn't know at the time is Senator Royce West from Dallas had been asked to lead, start the session, Senate session in prayer, and he had already decided he wanted everybody in the Senate to join hands and recite the Lord's Prayer. So Royce West, and you can pull it up and see it, he asked all the senators to join hands, and he asked all the staff to join hands. He asked all the people in the gallery to join hands, and he asked all the staff up around the dais to join hands. And so the entire Senate was filled with people joining hands and reciting the Lord's Prayer to begin our session on that Sunday. And that was the first time in history that we'd had a church service of senators only. Following that, the senators decided they want to do that and make that a tradition. And so not only did we accomplish something significant in property tax and education for the first time in 38 years, but we began a tradition of the senators having a church service on that last Sunday before the end of session. That I will tell you, we won't know the lives that changed until we know the lives that have changed. And that was in my 13 years now, not even close second, far and away the coolest experience I've had.
I don't want to follow that. Mine's going to seem so secular now. Terrible. In terms of advice for the grassroots, I'd say just stay active. I know there's a lot of frustrated people. I know there's a lot of folks who feel like the session wasn't worth as much as some of us do, but you got to stay active, you got to stay involved, you got to stay engaged. Now's the time to be talking to your reps and senators about what was right, what was wrong, what they need to do better, what you would, some different things they could do, finding local candidates to run for these places now that you know that that's where the onus of your property taxes are. So just stay involved. I know it's tough, but that's the best thing to me, to communicate, continue to communicate to us. Again, like I said, I don't care if you tell me I'm wrong or very bad on something. I want to hear that. We should all be accountable. We should want to be accountable. The Freedom Caucus has taken a lot of heat since session's been over, and I told the Freedom Caucus people, I said, hey, let's hear them out. If there's any merit to it, we need to hear it and change and adjust. If there's not as much merit to it, then we need to keep moving forward in the confidence that we're doing what we're supposed to do, but you don't know that unless you're listening to the other, to the people who have a different perspective than you. So keep talking, keep engaging, keep communicating, keep telling us when we're doing bad, tell us when we're doing good. So that's what my message would be to the grassroots. Just stay involved and appreciate everything y'all have already done up until this point and will continue to do. In terms of the session, I have a little different perspective than Representative Stickland. He said, on social issues, we didn't do anything to distinguish ourselves from the Democrats. I don't think so. You look at the Infant Born Alive Protection Act. Now, will it save a bunch of lives? Probably not. But what it did was draw a sharp contrast to how radical and extreme the Democrats are on the life issue. When you didn't have but a handful of Democrats in the House and one Democrat, two Democrats in the Senate vote to say, hey, if you try to perform an abortion on a child and that child survives, then you have to give that child life-saving treatment. When you can't even validate and vote for that, that's extreme. That's radical. And so, to me, that's a great platform for Republicans on social issues. I was honored to carry the what we call the First Amendment Defense Act, what some people call the Save Chick-fil-A bill in the House. Senator Hughes did an incredible job over in the Senate. And when you had every Democrat in the House vote against reaffirming the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, the freedom of association, that the government should be able to penalize you for who you support, donate, or associate with, especially a religious organization, that's extreme. That's radical. So to me, we did draw some stark contrast for the next election cycle on social issues. A lot of people downplayed or kind of diminished the lemonade stand bill that I worked on, which I get it in some ways, but in other ways, research and studies have shown that kids who start their own lemonade stand are exponentially more likely to start their own businesses when they get older. So we really are trying to promote and enhance the next generation of entrepreneurs, which I think is a good thing. Plus, anytime you can tell cities and counties you can't do something, that's something we all enjoy doing, right? I mean, that they can no longer do something. So I thought that was really good. So I do think there were some positives that we come away with. We all worked on a bill, voted on a bill that says in the past, if you defaulted on your student loans, you could lose your occupational license, which doesn't make any sense because then how can you work to pay back your student loans if you lose your livelihood? We got rid of that this session. Last session, we ended forced annexation for the big counties, but not everybody else in Texas. This session, we went back and did that. Now nobody can be forcibly annexed in Texas, which I think is a big deal. Free speech on college campuses, which has come under attack. We now have one of the strongest free speech laws in America, thanks to Briscoe Kane and Joan Huffman. Is she the one who worked? Yeah, and so there were some good things. Again, were there missed opportunities? Absolutely. Can we get other things done next session? Absolutely. Do we need to pass Senate Bill 1891 next session? Of course we do. But I do think there were a lot of good things coming out of the session as well. And I guess one of my favorite things of all of session was just hearing from back home. Jenny and the kids were so good about watching it. In fact, my 7-year-old the other day, something happened in our house and he goes, well, as Mr. Stickland would say, wow. So they were watching it. And then on the Chick-fil-A bill, when Briscoe Kane went up to call a point of order on one of the bad amendments, they said that the kids were going crazy on that, cheering for it. They were watching our Lemonade Day bill. Amendment got put on in the Senate that had some unintended consequences, and Representative Wu, who's from Houston, brought that out from the back mic. I was going to accept it and just be done with it and send it to the governor's desk because I'm not really used to passing laws, and I was like, we got to get this thing done. I don't know if we have time to go to conference. But through the back and forth, the chamber started booing, they started hissing, they started, just getting upset with the Senate for everything bad that they had done. And then so they were just getting livid. And finally Gene Wu said, are you going to accept? And I said, Chamber, what do you think? And everybody started yelling, go to conference. And then I said, all right, we're going to conference. And they started chanting, USA, USA, which hardly ever happens in there. It was really cathartic. And so that was kind of a fun memory for me. But just having the kids back home, I'd get texts. That was a great point, or Briscoe killed another bill on a point of order, or what's Stickland doing now, or things like that, and that was a lot of fun for me. So thank you guys again, thanks for having us tonight.
So I think it's conversations like these that differentiates Northeast Tarrant Tea Party from some of the other clubs in the area. So not only am I so appreciative of the relationship, the ongoing relationship we have with you guys, and that you're willing to do this, I also want to mention that we were supposed to have it next month, like I had said, and absolutely we had confirmations from Tony Tinderholt, Bill Zedler, Stephanie Click, who am I forgetting? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I wanted you to know that.
Yeah.
Oh no, Jim. Sorry, silence there. So honestly, I didn't even invite him. But anyway, so thank you guys, and let's just continue to hold them accountable.